Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ratliff Mandolins weekly production diary series. For those of you who are following along each and every week with us, you'll know that we are getting ready to glue the back on this Gibson guitar, a late 30s or an early 40s archtop guitar that had a lot of work to be done, and we're just about ready to put the back on. As you can see, I have all the spool clamps laid out, a couple of little pieces to be glued back onto the back before we can glue it on, and I did that just a few minutes ago, so it's really about all we can do to the guitar today, and maybe we'll be able to get the back glued on tomorrow. Now, as you also, if you're following the series, and you will know that we are getting ready to start a new batch of mandolins. I'll build in batches of 10, and two of the mandolins that we have or two of the instruments actually that we have in this upcoming batch are going to be mando-cellos. Now, my heating irons to bend the sides with, I only have the capacity to bend A-style mandolins or F-style mandolins. That's it. I have a frame with a heating element on top of that, and I'll show you a picture of it. The actual bending units rest on that frame and on that heating element, and they're shaped like the part that we're trying to make. So there again, I just have A-styles and F-style mandolins. That's all I can make. So the problem is, building a mando-cello, I have no way of bending those sides. What we're going to do is design and build, as best as we can, a generic heating unit that will, or a generic molding unit that will fit on that heating element. And to do that, my friend Steve Patton has helped me as well weld up a frame that sits on the lining pins of the heating unit in there, and this steel or this aluminum plate, this thing will bolt onto the bottom side of that and sit on top of the heating element, and therefore it will get hot. You will notice that there is a circle, a ring of holes in here, and the idea there is to stop, hopefully we can hold the heat right here and not let so much of it escape out into the table part. So we're going to be drilling more and more holes and bigger holes here in just a few minutes in an effort to stop that issue. And the next thing that we're going to do after that's taken care of is to take these varied size pieces of pipe and figure out where we want those things to be attached right there. What I have in mind is to have two at a time, sit just the right amount apart so that we can take a set of sides, any kind of sides, any thickness up to here, that thick, and fit it in here, and we'll have a hot iron and a backer to stop, to bend this with. That's what I have in mind. And we can bend either on this radius or the smaller radius. And we have 4 different radiuses, so if I can figure out the best way to attach these things, then we can put 2 on at a time. Anytime we need to bend a smaller radius, we can just take the apparatus apart and change bending backers. That's the idea anyway. So I'm going to spend the rest of my day, like I said, drilling holes in this thing and putting it all back together and trying to figure out where to put these things. And I will check back with you tomorrow or the next day. Well, as you can see, the Gibson guitar has had its back glued on. And so now we are going to take all those spool clamps off and see what we have. Now that we have the clamps off, we can examine our glue joint, which looks very good. All put together quite nicely, and we can now move on to the next issues with this guitar. Number one is this binding right here. As you can see, there's been a piece broken off and apparently lost in the past, and someone has taken thin strips of other kinds of plastic and nailed those into place. So we need to address that issue somehow, some way. And not only on the top, but we're going to have the same kind of issue with missing binding on the back. So we have to take care of that issue some way. And then other than that, let's see. We have a set of keys that are in as bad a shape as you will ever see a set of keys. Loose, none of the buttons are good. The posts are all mismatched and everything. So we'll have to get into my box of junk keys and everything and see if we can cobble something together. And then we have other things that, just like on the banjo from last week, we'll have to polish and clean, like the tailpiece. It's all rusty and everything. We'll clean that up and make it as pretty as possible. And I think there might be some fret issues that we have to address before we can put strings on and give this back to the customer. However, with the back being put on now, we have made a major step forward in the repair of this Gibson guitar. And speaking of major steps forward, we have gotten far enough along on our bending apparatus to at least bend a test piece of wood. I have the bending irons mounted to the plate, mounted to the mounting bracket, and heated them up yesterday and bent that piece of wood. So it's a success. A couple of disappointments as well. The ring of holes, although I'm sure it done some good, did not actually contain all that much heat inside this area, and it took about an hour and a half of being turned on before this pipe got hot all the way to the end, enough to bend our wood. So I don't know what I'm going to do about that, but I'm seriously considering going back and drilling another ring of holes. But to make a long story short, I think we do have a workable thing that will at least get our mando-cello sides bent. And now back to our Gibson guitar. I've been cleaning up the binding slot, the glue squeeze out and all that sort of thing, and mulling over my binding issues. And I think that the best thing to do is to take a piece of that back binding and patch this binding on the front with it, because it'll match all of the wear and the tear and the aging. But that leaves me with even less back binding to fix the binding on the back. So I've been trying to run through all of the options that I might have, and basically I have white binding, black binding, tortoiseshell binding, or wooden binding, because I can't seem to find binding that's going to match this stuff. So I've called the customer, discussed this issue with him, and I told him that I would I would just hold up a test strip of every option here, and he could take a look at it, and we could make some sort of decision as to what to do next. And so that's what we're going to do. And we're going to start off with what I thought was going to be my number one choice, which was just a piece of white binding. But as you can see, golly, that stands out like a sore thumb. Yellowed binding and the white binding just don't match. So the next thing I thought was, well, perhaps a piece of tortoiseshell binding. The tortoiseshell binding, first of all, most of the tortoiseshell binding that I can find, it has too much red in it by a long shot, stands out, it's not pretty, and most of it is 60 thousandths, and this thickness right here seems to be like it's about 62 or 3 thousandths, so the tortoiseshell binding don't even really fit in the slot, or at least the tortoiseshell binding that I have here in stock. So, and doesn't look very good, I don't think, either. The next option is black. Here's some black. That's not too bad, actually. Not too bad at all. And the final option is I have taken a piece of maple, stripped it down to the right size, and stained it up. And to my eye, this is the best match. It's just to put a piece of wooden binding on it, stained as best we can to match the guitar. From 2 feet away, I don't even think you would actually see it. And the added benefit here is that we can glue it on with regular wood glue and don't have to worry about marring the finish here with any of the acetate-based glues or super glues that we would have to use with white, black, or tortoise. So my vote is going to go for fixing the top with the leftover back binding and gluing on a piece of stained wooden binding to match. And so that is where we are at on our Gibson guitar. I have contacted the customer, and he's going to watch this video and help me make a decision as to the best way to go about fixing that thing. So all work is going to be on hold for the Gibson guitar for the moment. I have indeed decided to go ahead and drill more holes around the center portion of this thing in an effort to contain even more heat in here, if at all possible. And my friend Steve Patton, who is not only a wonderful guitar player but a good welder as well, is going to add some steel plates on the bottom of those uprights that we use to bend with, and in an effort to help with the heat transfer from here to those steel pieces. And of course we're doing this so that we can build those 2 mando-cellos that are going to be in our next batch of 10 mandolins. And seeing as how they were the first 2 to be ordered, believe it or not, I kind of felt like I would go ahead and get them up off the ground and running before we moved on to the mandolins. So next week I will do my utmost to pull some of the materials together for these mando-cellos, get some of the sides sawn out and sanded and ready to go. And of course we've still got to worry about actually getting the molds built, so we need to either rustle around here or go to one of the big box stores to find some 3/4 inch plywood to build the molds out of. So it's going to be a busy week next week on the Ratliff Mandolins weekly production diary series, and certainly hope you join us next week. Each and every week, by the way, so we will look forward to seeing you then.